If a man proposes to his girlfriend and she says no, is the relationship over? Not necessarily, but it's usually recommended to discuss engagement marriage with your partner rather than just throwing that question on them, especially if you're gonna make a scene and do it in public. That way, if you discuss it, there won't be any unpleasant surprises for you, and it won't make it an uncomfortable scene for them. Depends on the reason. Nah, my buddy proposed to his girlfriend and she said no. They eventually did get married a few years later and have been happily married for 15 or so years now with 2 kids. The timing just wasn't right. That's why before I proposed to my wife, we went ring shopping and all that jazz. Helps you get a sense of whether you're on the same page. Is it a no to indicate that you feel your relationship has no future? Or is it a not right now to let him know you're not there yet? There's a big difference. A little over 35 years ago, my wife told me no and that I was crazy. 3 days later she said yes. Been married over 34 years and have 4 kids. Not necessarily. If you didn't talk about it beforehand, it could be a real shock and she might panic and say no. She might love you and just not be ready for that step. Don't spring marriage on someone without talking about it first. Not necessarily, but it's hard to bounce back from that. Not right now or this isn't the right moment is better than definitely not or peals of laughter. Obviously, that depends on the 2 individuals involved in the relationship. Not necessarily, but it is always important to communicate with one another when it comes to these things. It can just probably be they aren't ready. Yeah, it might suck, but that is better than leading you on and pay for divorce. Why did she say no? That's a critical piece of information. Can't he give meaningful advice without it? Depends if the no is not yet or not ever. I've told my partner of 4 years if he proposed now I wouldn't say yes as I don't think our relationship is at the point I want it, meaning I wouldn't feel that excited about it if he was to do it since we still have looming issues throughout our relationship that I would want to get through first. I said no the first time because I thought it was too soon. We stayed together and 6 months later we decided to get married. There was no formal second proposal, just a discussion. Still together 43 years later. So, no. A rejection doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship. Gavin, we are in a car accident. Not the time for this. Way more information is needed than this. There isn't a black and white answer, and it depends entirely on context as well as the expectations of the 2 people involved. In proposing, never ask the question if you don't already know the answer to when it's time. I know a guy who proposed 3 times and she said got 3 no's. He proposed the 4th and got a yes. They are happily married and the no's never impacted on the relationship. They both wanted the same thing, just at different paces. He never gave up and he's with his dream girl for life now. It's all about being able to be told no and not getting insecure about it. Depends, does no mean forever or does it mean not right now? Depends if it's a no or a not yet no. Not always. It really depends on the girl and the situation. I never publicly proposed, but my wife said number 2 or 3 times before saying yes. Probably. Yes. Why does everyone assume the only goal of a relationship is to get married? Many people don't care for it anymore. It's not 1960. So if that's the reason to say no, there is no reason to end the relationship. If it's I don't think I'm ready, then a discussion of when and why is in order before the relationship should continue. If the answer is not with you, then yes, it should end there. Not necessarily. Most of the times, yes. Yeah. And if it goes past there? Eventually. I don't personally know anyone that fits this hypothetical, but I imagine it does happen. Depends on the length of the response when turned down, the tone of voice. It's at least stalled or at an impasse. Sometimes it is because of the way she was asked. If he takes her to her favorite restaurant and has the ring brought out in a cake, she might say no because she always imagined that she would be asked on a magical night by the side of a lake while riding a unicorn on a moonbeam shining through illuminated clouds. My dad did this after for months of dating my mom. They are childhood friends. The relationship went on, so I guess the answer was no. I always thought that it doesn't have to be. A person can just be unprepared for marriage or think it's early. I personally wouldn't want a big proposal. Instead, I'd like it brought up during a conversation while doing something intimate like cuddling. I want it to be a mutual decision formed after a discussion on the matter. This gives me the option to say no, to explain myself, and to avoid excessive harm to my partner's ego. In a scenario like that, unless you say something out of line or the partner has an overly enlarged ego, you should be safe. From her point of view, probably not, but maybe. From his point of view, definitely, because his poor, precious ego took a boo-boo and he'll sulk and turn nasty in revenge. I'm gonna go a hard yes on that. Yes. If I had been hinting at a proposal and she had been indicating towards one too, if I had confidence in the relationship, then I get turned down, it is probably the end. I wouldn't ask unless I had confidence that she wanted it beforehand, and I would only get that confidence if we had. Relationship advice: the only rules that exist in the relationship are the rules those two people agree to. So, it depends. That depends on why she says no. You should never propose without having discussed future plans with your SO. It's something that has to be mutually agreed on and that you know the answer to prior to asking. So by the time you propose, you know the answer will be yes. There's no set rule on this, but it's certainly not a good sign. Likely. Yes. If he wants to get married, he only has a limited amount of time to do so. Depends. Not necessarily. I proposed to my husband 30 years ago. He said no. We didn't break up. We've been married for 29 years. He's old-fashioned. He wanted to be the one who proposed. 13 years ago, someone proposed to me. I laughed and said no, thinking it must be a joke, since I had just gotten divorced 2 weeks prior. She tried again a few months later when I was less of a wreck, and I said yes. We've been happily married for 12 years. 95 of the time, yes. No, not necessarily. Sometimes you just need time. As long as there is open and honest communication, there may be hope. It would be if my proposal got rejected. The president proposed to his wife a few times before she said yes, if I recall correctly. But also note, everyone has different plans for the future. The girl may want to stay in a relationship but may reject the concept of marriage. So I suppose it depends. I think you need to talk about it and be sure if it's really no or not yet. Too broad of a question. It depends entirely on the circumstances. If he's smart, it is. I don't understand the not yet thing. You're getting engaged. It's just a ring. There's no commitment. You can always call it off at any time before the wedding, and you haven't even picked a date for that yet. On the other hand, if it's straight no, then quit wasting each other's time and let him find someone who feels the same way about him as he does about you. My friend proposed to his girlfriend many, many years ago. She said no. In the years since, she has repeatedly asked him to propose again, and he always says no. It was a one-time thing. They have been living together ever since, 40 years. Still not married.